My name is Arturo Henderson, and at 63, I never thought I'd be staring down at a poisoned glass of wine meant to end my life. 40 years of working my fingers to the bone for my family, and this is how my son repays me. What's even more gut-wrenching, I saw him slip something into my drink with my own eyes. But instead of confronting him, I quietly switched glasses with his wife. What happened next left everyone at that dinner table completely stunned. Before I tell you this story, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button as I reveal how I uncovered my son's betrayal. I was born and raised in Chicago, a city of hard workers and dreamers. By the time I turned 23, I had already spent 5 years working construction, my calloused hands a testament to days spent under the Midwestern sun. It was at Rosie's Diner on 47th Street where I first laid eyes on Donna. She had this way of smiling that made even the toughest days seem bearable. Her brown hair always tied back in a neat ponytail as she poured coffee for the morning crowd. "You gonna order something or just stare at your empty cup all day?" she asked me one morning, a playful smile dancing across her lips. From that moment on, I knew she was the one. We married 6 months later in a small ceremony at her parents' backyard. Our first apartment was barely big enough for the two of us, a one-bedroom walk-up with temperamental plumbing and neighbors who fought like cats and dogs. But it was ours, and we were happy. When Jackson came along 2 years later, our tiny apartment seemed even smaller, but our hearts grew 3 sizes that day. I still remember holding him for the first time, this tiny human, with Donna's nose and my chin. The responsibility of fatherhood hit me like a ton of bricks, but so did the joy. "We made this little person," Donna whispered, exhausted but radiant in her hospital bed. I worked longer hours after Jackson was born. Construction during the day, stocking shelves at the local grocery store 3 nights a week. Sleep became a luxury I could rarely afford, but every yawn felt worth it when I saw my boy growing up healthy and strong. By the time Jackson turned 4, we had saved enough for a down payment on a small house in the suburbs. Nothing fancy, just a modest 3-bedroom with a patch of yard where Jackson could play. The day we moved in, I carried Donna across the threshold like we were newlyweds all over again. "Our very own piece of the American dream," she said, kissing my cheek. Life threw us a curveball when Donna developed rheumatoid arthritis in her early 30s. The diner job became too painful, standing for hours, making her joints swell and ache. She tried working at a call center for a while, but even that became too much as the disease progressed. I picked up weekend shifts at a warehouse loading dock. The foreman there knew my situation and would slip me extra hours whenever possible. My body complained, muscles aching from the constant labor, but providing for my family was all that mattered. "You need to rest sometimes," Donna would say, massaging my shoulders as I sat at our kitchen table, too tired to even eat dinner some nights. "I will rest when Jackson graduates college," I would reply, only half joking. Speaking of Jackson, that boy showed promise from an early age. Sharp as a tack with numbers and a natural curiosity that made his teachers take notice. Donna and I made sure he never went without the things he needed for school. Science fair projects, new calculators, proper clothes, whatever it took. We skipped family vacations, drove older cars, and clipped coupons religiously. But Jackson never missed an educational opportunity. I remember one parent-teacher conference where his math teacher told us he had college-level abilities already just in the 8th grade. "Your son could go far with the right education," she said. Those words became my mantra during double shifts and overtime. Your son could go far. On especially tough days when my back spasmed from lifting heavy materials, or when a roofing job left me with blistered hands, I would repeat those words to myself. The injuries came more frequently as I aged. A twisted ankle from a misstep on scaffolding. a crushed finger that never quite straightened again, the permanent ache in my lower back that no amount of pain pills seemed to touch. Construction takes its toll, but I wore those injuries like badges of honor. Each one represented another bill paid another step toward Jackson's future. When that future arrived in the form of an acceptance letter from Westmore University, one of the top schools in the country, Donna and I cried together at the kitchen table after Jackson went to bed. "He did it," Donna said, squeezing my hand. "We did it," I corrected her. It had been a family effort, every sacrifice leading to this moment. The tuition bill, however, was a shock to the system. Even with a partial scholarship, the numbers seemed impossible. After a long discussion, we decided to remortgage our home. It meant I would be working well past the age when most of my colleagues were retiring, but seeing Jackson walk across that stage in a cap and gown would make it all worthwhile. "Are you sure about this?" Donna asked as we signed the papers at the bank. "I have never been more sure of anything," I replied, and I meant it. Jackson thrived at Westmore. His phone calls home were filled with excitement about classes, professors who were leading experts in their fields, and new concepts that sometimes went over my head. I nodded along anyway, proud that my son was learning things I could barely pronounce. It was during his junior year that he met Meredith. From the pictures he sent, she was beautiful in that polished way that spoke of privileged blonde hair, always perfectly styled clothes that looked like they cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Her father is a senior partner at Caldwell and Burke, Jackson told us during a weekend visit home, a hint of awe in his voice. Donna and I exchanged glances. We knew about Caldwell and Burke, a prestigious law firm whose name appeared on downtown buildings and charity gala programs. It was a world away from construction sites and discount grocery stores. Jackson graduated summa cum laude, and Donna and I sat in the audience bursting with pride, our boy in his crisp black gown accepting his diploma with a firm handshake. All the overtime, all the missed weekends, all the physical pain crystallized into that perfect moment. His first job offer came from a financial firm in the city, with a starting salary that made my lifetime earnings seem paltry by comparison. Within 2 years, he was promoted twice and engaged to Meredith. They bought a house in an exclusive neighborhood, all glass and modern angles, the kind of place featured in magazines. The wedding was an elaborate affair at a country club with ice sculptures and a 7-piece band. Donna and I felt out of place among the guests, most of whom arrived in luxury cars, and spoke about summer homes and yacht clubs. "Just smile and be polite," Donna whispered to me as we navigated the cocktail hour, unsure which fork to use for the appetizers. I noticed a change in Jackson after the wedding. His visits became less frequent, phone calls shorter. When he did come by, he seemed distracted, checking his watch or his phone, always having somewhere more important to be. "Success is changing our boy," Donna observed one night after a particularly brief visit where Jackson barely touched his dinner before making excuses to leave. "He is just busy," I said, defending him even as a knot formed in my stomach. "Building his career takes time." I wanted to believe it was just a phase, that the son who once sat on my shoulders pointing at airplanes would return once he settled into his new life. But as months turned into years, the distance only grew. The handmade birthday cards were replaced by gift cards sent through email. Christmas visits shortened from days to hours. And through it all, I kept working, kept providing, kept believing that family was forever, even as the evidence mounted that Jackson was drifting toward a world where I could not follow. The first time I truly understood something was wrong was on my 60th birthday. Donna had planned a small gathering at our home, nothing fancy, just family and a few close friends from the neighborhood. She had been baking for days, making my favorite German chocolate cake from scratch, and decorating the house with photos from throughout our life together. Jackson promised he would be here by 6, she said, checking the clock for the 10th time as our guests mingled in the living room. 6 became 7, then 8. By 9, we cut the cake without him. Just as we were serving coffee, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a delivery person holding a large gift basket full of expensive wines and cheeses with a card signed by Jackson and Meredith. "Emergency at work. Rain check, happy birthday, Dad." The message was brief, impersonal. I placed the basket on the kitchen counter and rejoined the party, pasting on a smile while Donna squeezed my hand under the table. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, she found me sitting alone on our back porch. "He is just busy," she said, echoing my own words back to me. "Too busy for 2 hours on his father's 60th birthday." I asked, the hurt finally breaking through. She had no answer for that. The expensive but impersonal gifts became a pattern. A high-end coffee maker for Christmas that was far too complicated for our simple needs. A smartwatch for Father's Day when I still used a flip phone. It felt like Jackson was trying to pay off an obligation rather than connect with his parents. During a family Thanksgiving at my brother Frank's house, I overheard Jackson talking to his cousin in the kitchen. Dad just would not understand the complexities, he was saying. He is a good guy, but uneducated. You know how it is with that generation of blue-collar workers. I froze in the hallway, the ice bucket I had gone to fill suddenly heavy in my hands. Uneducated, as if the decades of practical knowledge I had accumulated, the skills that had kept our family afloat, meant nothing compared to his degree. I said nothing that day, swallowing the hurt alongside the turkey and stuffing. But something shifted in me. The unquestioning pride I had always felt in my son was now tinged with a painful awareness that perhaps he did not feel the same about me. Then Donna got sick. What started as persistent fatigue was diagnosed as stage 3 ovarian cancer. My world collapsed in a sterile doctor's office as terms like aggressive treatment and survival rates washed over us. "We will fight this," I told her in the car afterward, reaching for a confidence I did not feel. "Together," she agreed, her voice small but determined. The medical bills started arriving immediately. Even with insurance, the out-of-pocket costs were staggering. I took on part-time security work at a mall, standing for hours, despite my aging knees, coming home just in time to drive Donna to her chemotherapy appointments. I called Jackson the day after the diagnosis, my voice breaking as I explained the situation. "That is terrible news," he said, sounding genuinely shocked. "What can I do?" "Just be here," I told him. "Your mother needs her family around her now." He visited the hospital once during her first week of treatment, arriving in an expensive suit straight from a meeting, staying for exactly 45 minutes before checking his watch and making excuses about a client dinner. Meredith came with him, her discomfort evident in the way she hovered near the door, as if cancer might be contagious. She brought a bouquet of flowers so large it barely fit on the windowsill, but could barely look at Donna's pale face and thinning hair. "The hospital smell makes me lightheaded," she explained as she stepped into the hallway, leaving Jackson to make awkward small talk with his dying mother. Meanwhile, the nurses on the oncology floor learned my name. They saved me cups of coffee from their break room as I spent night after night sleeping in a vinyl chair beside Donna's bed, unwilling to leave her alone in a place of beeping machines and antiseptic smells. "Your husband is a saint," I overheard one nurse telling Donna during a sponge bath. 30 years in this job and I have never seen such devotion." 38 years married, Donna corrected weakly. "And he has been a saint for every one of them." Jackson called rather than visited as the weeks went on. Always with reasonable excuses, always sending his love, always promising to come as soon as things calmed down at work. Meredith stopped coming altogether. On particularly bad nights when pain kept Donna awake, and medicine made her confused, she would sometimes mistake me for Jackson in her delirium. "My beautiful boy," she would murmur, patting my cheek with her paper-thin hand. "So proud of you." I never corrected her. Let her believe her son was the one sitting vigil if it brought her comfort. After 6 months of treatments, surgeries, and brief rallies followed by devastating setbacks, Donna slipped away on a quiet Tuesday morning. Her hand in mine, her last words, a whispered, "Thank you for our life together." The funeral was held 3 days later. Jackson arrived 10 minutes before the service began, Meredith at his side in an appropriately somber black dress. He hugged me briefly, the scent of expensive cologne surrounding him. "You hanging in there, Dad?" he asked, as if we were discussing a minor inconvenience rather than the shattering of my entire world. He sat in the front row, as expected, accepted condolences with proper solemnity, and even spoke a few words about his mother's kindness and strength. But halfway through the reception at our home, his phone buzzed with a message that had him frowning and reaching for his coat. "Emergency at the office," he explained, already moving toward the door. "Major client situation. You understand, right?" I did not understand. I could not fathom what business emergency could possibly take precedence over his mother's funeral day. But I nodded anyway, too numb with grief to argue. After everyone left, I sat alone in our bedroom surrounded by Donna's things. Her reading glasses still on the nightstand, her robe hanging on the bathroom door, the indentation of her head still visible on her pillow. The house that had always felt modestly sized now seemed cavernous in its emptiness. A week later, while sorting through Donna's belongings, I found her journal tucked in her nightstand drawer. I had known she kept one, but had always respected her privacy. Now, seeking connection to her in any form, I opened it. The entries from the past year broke my heart anew. Jackson visited today. 15 minutes. Looked at his watch 12 times, I counted. Does he think I do not notice Arturo works so hard to hide his disappointment? My poor husband bearing all this alone. And later called Jackson about the new treatment option. He said he was in a meeting and would call back. Still waiting. Arturo sleeping in that awful chair again tonight. My saint. The contrast between her son's absence and her husband's presence filled page after page her handwriting, growing shakier as her condition worsened, but her awareness never dimming. My neighbors brought casseroles. Frank and his wife had me over for Sunday dinners. Donna's friends from her old church group called regularly to check on me. Jackson sent a gift basket with gourmet food items and a note saying, "Hope you are doing well. Swamped at work. Call if you need anything." As if grief were something that could be addressed with smoked salmon and artisanal crackers. I returned to an empty house each night, learned to cook for one, and fell asleep watching old movies Donna and I had enjoyed together. The silence was deafening, the loneliness suffocating. When Christmas came, Jackson invited me to their home for dinner. "Meredith is having her entire family over. It will be good for you to be around people," he said. I declined. The thought of being a charity case at a table full of strangers while trying to mask my grief felt unbearable. Instead, I volunteered at a local shelter serving meals, finding more comfort among the homeless than I likely would have in my son's pristine dining room. My blood pressure rose. My weight dropped. My doctor prescribed medication for depression I refused to take. Grief, I told him, was not a medical condition. It was the price of having loved deeply, and I would not numb it away. And through it all, a question haunted me. Had I somehow failed as a father? Had all the sacrifices, all the long hours, all the missed opportunities for my own advancement somehow created a son who could not see the value in being present for his family in their darkest hour? I had no answer. Only the echoing silence of a house that had once been filled with love, and the growing realization that the future I had worked so hard to secure looked nothing like what I had envisioned. 6 months after Donna's passing, I received a call from a lawyer named Harold Greenwood. "Mr. Henderson, I represent the estate of Eleanor Marshall," he said in a clipped professional tone. "Ms. Marshall was your late wife's aunt." I vaguely remembered Donna mentioning an aunt who had moved to Arizona decades ago. They had exchanged Christmas cards, but little else. "Ms. Marshall passed away last month," the lawyer continued, "and as her last living relative, your wife was named as her heir. Since your wife is deceased, the inheritance now passes to you." I sat down heavily on the kitchen chair, confused. Inheritance, what inheritance? Ms. Marshall was quite successful in real estate investments. The estate is valued at approximately $3.2 million, Mr. Henderson. The room seemed to tilt sideways. $3 million. I had worked my entire life and never seen even a fraction of that amount. "There must be some mistake," I said. "No mistake, sir. The paperwork is in order. We can meet at my office to discuss the details and begin the transfer process." After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. Donna had never mentioned her aunt having money. Perhaps she had not known. Or perhaps in her practical way, she had not seen the point in discussing someone else's wealth that had nothing to do with our lives. Now that wealth was mine, and I had no idea what to do with it. Our modest home was already paid off. My needs were simple. After a lifetime of stretching every dollar, the thought of having millions was almost frightening. I decided not to tell anyone immediately, not even Jackson. I needed time to process this change in circumstances and decide how to move forward. That decision lasted exactly 3 weeks. Then on a Tuesday morning, my phone rang with Jackson's number on the display, the first call from him in over a month. "Dad." His voice was warm, enthusiastic, as if we spoke every day. "How have you been? I have been meaning to call." "I am fine," I said, cautious. "Is everything okay?" "Everything is great. Actually, I was thinking we should have dinner soon. Catch up properly. It has been too long." Too long indeed, though the timing of his sudden interest raised immediate suspicions. "That would be nice," I said, non-committal. "How did you hear about the inheritance?" A beat of silence. Then, what inheritance? Either he was genuinely unaware or he was a better actor than I gave him credit for. I decided to test the waters. "Just something small from your mother's side. Nothing important." "Oh." The disappointment was audible. "Well, still, we should get together. How about Friday at La Maison? I will make reservations for 7. La Maison was one of the most expensive restaurants in the city, the kind of place where entrees cost more than I used to make in a day of construction work. Jackson knew I was uncomfortable in such establishments, with their multiple forks and snooty sommeliers. "How about Miller's Diner instead?" I suggested. "Your mother and I had our first date there." Another pause. "Sure, Dad. Whatever makes you happy." We met at Miller's that Friday. Jackson arrived in a tailored suit that made him look out of place among the vinyl booths and paper placemats. He ordered a salad, picking at it, while glancing around the diner with barely concealed disdain. "So," he said after some perfunctory small talk about the weather and his job, "tell me about this inheritance. From Mom's side, you said, her Aunt Eleanor." I confirmed, watching his expression carefully. "We were not close. I only met her a couple of times at family functions decades ago. And she left Mom money." His attempt at casual interest was betrayed by the intensity in his eyes. "Some," I acknowledged. "The lawyer is still sorting through the details." "You should let me help with that," he offered immediately. "Financial management is what I do after all. I could make sure you are not being taken advantage of. Taken advantage of? You know how these lawyers can be, Dad. They see an older man on his own, recently widowed, maybe not fully understanding all the financial implications. I had spent 40 years managing a household budget that required stretching every penny. I had negotiated bank loans, mortgage refinancing, and medical payment plans. The assumption that I was somehow financially incompetent was as insulting as it was transparent. I think I can manage, I said mildly, taking a bite of my meatloaf. The lawyer seems reputable. Jackson's calls became more frequent after that. So did his visits, often with Meredith in tow. She too had undergone a remarkable transformation from a woman who could barely stand to be in my modest home to someone who noticed every little thing that needed fixing. "This kitchen is so outdated," she commented during one visit, running her manicured finger along my countertop. "Have you thought about renovating? We know an amazing contractor." "I like it as it is," I replied. "Donna picked out those cabinets herself." "Well, at least let us help you find a better place to live," Jackson chimed in. "There are some wonderful retirement communities with excellent amenities." I was 63, not 83. The suggestion that I should be shuffled off to a retirement home was yet another indication of how little my son understood me or cared to. The questions about the inheritance became more direct as weeks passed. How much exactly was it, liquid assets or property? Had I considered investment options, each inquiry thinly veiled by expressions of concern for my welfare? One afternoon, returning from grocery shopping, I found Jackson's car in my driveway, unexpected. Using my key, I entered quietly through the side door leading to the kitchen. Voices drifted from my home office. "It has to be here somewhere," Jackson was saying, frustration evident in his tone. "Tax documents, bank statements, something." I moved silently down the hallway, stopping just short of the office doorway. Through the crack, I could see Jackson rifling through my desk drawers, while Meredith stood lookout near the window. "Hurry up," she hissed. "He could be back any minute." "I am hurrying. Dad never was organized with paperwork." Another falsehood. My files were meticulously maintained, sorted by year and category, a system Donna and I had developed to keep track of every expense. The fact that Jackson could not find what he was looking for spoke to his unfamiliarity with his parents' actual lives, not my organizational skills. I cleared my throat loudly before entering the room. "Looking for something." They both jumped, guilt flashing across their faces, before Jackson recovered. "Dad, you surprised us. We were just looking for that photo album from my graduation. Meredith has never seen my college pictures." "The photo albums are in the living room bookshelf," I said evenly, "where they have always been." On an awkward silence stretched between us, the lie hanging in the air like a bad smell. "Right," Jackson finally said. "Silly me. Must have misremembered." The visit ended shortly after with strained smiles and promises to call soon. As I watched them drive away, I felt a cold clarity settling over me. My son was not reconnecting out of love or concern. He was prospecting like a miner seeking gold, seeing me not as his father, but as a potential windfall. The final confirmation came a week later, when Jackson arrived unannounced with a leather portfolio and a man he introduced as Doug, my associate from work. Doug, it turned out, was not just an associate, but a financial advisor from Jackson's firm. The portfolio contained estate planning documents already filled out with my information, requiring only my signature to grant Jackson power of attorney and restructure my assets into accounts he would co-manage. "This is all for your protection, Dad," Jackson explained, sliding the papers across my kitchen table. "Given your age and situation, it is important to have proper financial guidance." I looked at the documents, then at my son's expectant face, and felt a profound sadness wash over me. My age and situation, I repeated slowly. You mean being old and alone? I would not put it that way. He backpedaled. Just being practical. Practical, I echoed. Like when you were too busy to visit your mother in the hospital, or when you left her funeral early for a business emergency. His face hardened. That is not fair. I have responsibilities, a career. And I had a lifetime of responsibilities to you. I replied, my voice steady despite the anger building inside me. Funny how those worked differently. I stood up, gathering the unsigned papers. I think you and Doug should leave now. And Jackson, do not come back until you are here to see me, not my bank account. And his expression shifted from shock to anger. You are being ridiculous. This is exactly why you need help managing your affairs. Your judgment is clearly compromised by grief. My judgment is fine, I said, opening the front door pointedly. Yours, however, seems to have been compromised by greed. After they left, I changed my phone number, contacted the inheritance lawyer to warn him about potential interference, and installed a new security system on my home. The messages Jackson left on my old voicemail ranged from concerned to indignant to outright accusatory. You are making a huge mistake, his final message said. We are only trying to help you, but fine, have it your way. When you realize you are in over your head, you know where to find us. The irony was not lost on me. After a lifetime of being there for my son, I now knew exactly where I stood in his estimation as a potential asset to be managed, not a father to be loved. And still, despite everything, a part of me hoped this was just a phase, a temporary madness brought on by whatever financial or personal pressures he might be facing. Because the alternative, that I had raised a son capable of such calculated coldness toward his own father, was almost too painful to bear. 2 months of silence followed my confrontation with Jackson. I used the time to begin processing my inheritance properly, working with Harold Greenwood to understand my options and responsibilities. I established a scholarship fund in Donna's name at the local community college, donated to the hospital wing where she had received treatment, and set aside money for my own modest needs. The rest I placed in conservative investments, neither extravagant nor miserly in my approach. I had lived too long with financial uncertainty to suddenly become reckless, but neither did I feel the need to hoard wealth I had never expected to have. Then, on a Wednesday morning in April, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Dad. Jackson's voice tentative in a way I had not heard since he was a child, afraid of thunderstorms. It is me. I know who it is, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. I got your new number from Uncle Frank. A pause. I wanted to apologize. For everything. I was out of line. The apology sounded rehearsed, lacking genuine remorse. Still, it was more than I had expected. I appreciate that, I said, not quite ready to accept, but unwilling to reject any potential olive branch. Meredith and I have been talking, he continued. We feel terrible about how things have been between us. We want to make it right. Would you come to dinner at our house this Saturday, just the three of us, a chance to really talk? I hesitated. The invitation seemed sincere enough, but after everything that had happened, trust did not come easily. Please, Dad, he added when I did not immediately respond. For Mom's sake. She would have wanted us to make peace. The invocation of Donna's memory was a low blow, but effective. She would indeed have wanted reconciliation between her husband and her son. What time? I finally asked. 7. And Dad? Thank you. This means a lot. I spent the days leading up to Saturday turning the invitation over in my mind, examining it from all angles, like a suspicious package that might contain either a gift or a bomb? Was Jackson genuinely remorseful? Had he realized the damage his behavior had caused to our relationship, or was this another angle, another attempt to access the inheritance? I decided to give him the benefit of the doubt, but not blindly. I would go to dinner with open eyes and a guarded heart. On Saturday, I found myself driving to the exclusive neighborhood where Jackson and Meredith had built their modernist showpiece of a home. Originally planning to arrive exactly at 7, I reconsidered and decided to come 30 minutes early. If this was a genuine attempt at reconciliation, a little extra time together would not matter. If something else was afoot, perhaps I might gain some insight by arriving unexpectedly. I parked on the street rather than in their circular driveway, approaching the house quietly. The spare key they had given me years ago, never used until now, turned smoothly in the lock of the side entrance that led through their 3-car garage. Voices carried from the kitchen raised in what sounded like heated discussion. I paused in the utility room, not announcing my presence just yet. "I cannot believe we are going through with this," Meredith was saying, her voice tight with tension. "We discussed this already," Jackson replied. "It is the only way." "But drugging your own father? There have to be other options." My blood ran cold. Drugging. I stood frozen, barely breathing, straining to hear more. "He left us no choice," Jackson said, his tone frighteningly reasonable. "He is being completely irrational about the money. $3 million, Meredith. $3 million that should be securing our future, and he is just giving it away to strangers. But what if something goes wrong? What if he has a bad reaction? The dosage is calculated for his weight. He will just get very drowsy, maybe pass out at the table. We call an ambulance, they take him to the hospital, and by the time he is discharged, I will have medical power of attorney. Old man living alone medical episode. It is a textbook case for intervention. And if he refuses to sign even then..." A pause, then Jackson's voice lower now. "Let me worry about that. Just follow the plan. 1 glass for him clearly marked. I will pour the wine myself." I backed silently out of the utility room, my mind racing. My own son was plotting to drug me to gain control of my finances through medical manipulation, or worse. The betrayal was so profound that for a moment I could not process. It could only feel a strange detachment, as if I were hearing about someone else's family tragedy. I returned to my car, drove around the block, and parked again, this time in the driveway. Gathering my composure, I approached the front door and rang the bell at exactly 7 o'clock, as if I had heard nothing, suspected nothing. Jackson answered with a broad smile that now seemed grotesque in its falseness. "Dad, right on time. Come in, come in." Meredith emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron that seemed more costume than practical garment. Her smile was strained, her eyes not meeting mine. "Arturo, so good to see you," she said, giving me a stiff hug that barely made contact. "Dinner is almost ready. Jackson, why do not you pour the wine?" "Great idea," he agreed with artificial enthusiasm. "Dad, I opened a special bottle of Cabernet. 1983, the year I was born." A sentimental touch to disarm me. I watched as he disappeared into their cavernous kitchen, returning moments later with 3 crystal wine glasses on a silver tray. "This one is yours," he said, placing a glass in front of me with deliberate care. "Best position to appreciate the view through the windows." I nodded in appreciation, noting how he subtly turned the glass so that a small smudge on the rim faced me. A marker, I realized, so he would know which glass contained the drugged wine. We made awkward small talk as Meredith finished preparing the meal. My favorite pot roast, Jackson mentioned. Another calculated touch. I asked about their work, their future plans, playing the role of the oblivious father, eager for reconciliation. When Meredith left briefly to answer a phone call, and Jackson stepped into the kitchen to check on the roast, I made my move. Quickly, silently, I switched my glass with Meredith's, being careful to position hers exactly as mine had been, smudge facing the same direction. Jackson returned, glancing subtly at my glass, a flash of satisfaction crossing his face when he saw it was still in the same position, still marked with the telltale smudge that was now in front of his unsuspecting wife. "A toast," he proposed as Meredith rejoined us. "To family and new beginnings." We raised our glasses. I pretended to sip mine, the wine never touching my lips. Jackson took a healthy swallow of his, watching me expectantly over the rim. Meredith drank deeply from what she thought was her glass, what was actually the vessel containing whatever substance Jackson had added. The effect was not immediate. We made it through the salad course, Meredith becoming gradually more flushed, her words beginning to slur slightly. By the time the main course was served, she was blinking rapidly, having trouble focusing. "I feel strange," she said, putting a hand to her forehead. "Dizzy." Jackson frowned, glancing from her to me, confusion evident. I had taken several fake sips from my glass, making sure he saw me appearing to drink, while never actually doing so. "Maybe you are coming down with something," he suggested to Meredith, but his eyes kept darting to my glass, still nearly full, and then to his wife's increasingly disoriented state. When she tried to stand, her legs buckled. She collapsed back into her chair, knocking over her water glass. "Something is wrong," she slurred. "Cannot feel my... Her eyes rolled back and she slumped forward onto the table. Jackson leapt up, genuine panic replacing his earlier calculated demeanor. "Meredith, what is happening?" He rushed to her side, lifting her head, checking her pulse. "She needs an ambulance," he said, reaching for his phone. I remained seated, watching the scene unfold, with a calm that surprised even me. "Is this what you intended for me?" I asked quietly. His head snapped up, his face draining of color as he met my gaze. "What?" "The drug you put in my wine," I clarified. "The one Meredith just drank instead. Is this how you planned for your father to end up helpless at your mercy?" Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed immediately by fear. You switched the glasses." "I heard you in the kitchen earlier," I said, my voice still calm, though my heart was breaking. "Arrived a bit early. Heard everything about your little plan to gain medical power of attorney, to take control of money that was never yours to begin with." He stared at me, mouth working soundlessly, caught between tending to his unconscious wife and defending the indefensible. "Call the ambulance, Jackson," I instructed. "Tell them she's ingested an unknown sedative. They will need to know what it was to treat her properly." His hands shook as he dialed, stammering out the address and situation to the emergency operator. I moved to Meredith's side, checking her breathing, putting her in the recovery position I had learned decades ago in a construction safety course. "She should live," I said as he ended the call, "assuming you did not intend to kill me with whatever you put in that wine." "No," he protested immediately. "It was just a sedative. Strong one, but not lethal. Just enough to render me incapacitated," I finished for him. "Helpless, vulnerable to whatever documents you planned to put in front of me." The wail of approaching sirens filled the silence between us. Jackson looked from his wife to me, the full weight of his actions finally seeming to register. "Dad, I can explain," he began. "I am sure you can," I replied, standing as flashing lights appeared through the windows. "And you will have plenty of time to do so. To the paramedics, to the police, to your wife when she wakes up. But not to me, Jackson. Never again to me." The next hours passed in a blur of emergency responders, police officers, and hospital corridors. Meredith was rushed to the emergency room, her stomach pumped, blood tests ordered. I gave my statement to a detective recounting everything I had overheard and witnessed my voice never wavering, despite the devastation I felt inside. Jackson was taken in for questioning, his expensive suit looking rumpled, his confident facade crumbling as the evidence mounted against him. I watched him being led away, this stranger who shared my blood, but apparently none of my values, and felt a hollow ache where my paternal pride had once resided. In that sterile hospital waiting room surrounded by the machinery of emergency medicine and the bureaucracy of law enforcement, I finally accepted what I had been trying to deny for years. The son I had sacrificed everything for was gone if he had ever truly existed at all. The hospital corridors felt oddly familiar, echoing with the same antiseptic smell and squeaking footsteps that had surrounded Donna's final months. Now it was Meredith in one of these bed's tubes and monitors attached to her still form, while I sat in another uncomfortable chair, maintaining another vigil. The doctors confirmed what Jackson had stammered to the police, a powerful sedative, the kind prescribed for severe insomnia, crushed and dissolved in the wine. A potentially lethal dose for someone of Meredith's size, especially combined with alcohol. Her stomach had been pumped in time, they assured me, but she would remain under observation for at least 24 hours. "Are you family?" a nurse asked as she checked Meredith's vitals. "Father-in-law," I replied, the words tasting bitter. "She is lucky you were there," the nurse commented. Quick thinking with the recovery position. Probably prevented aspiration. Lucky. An odd word for the circumstances. Lucky I had arrived early. Lucky I had overheard their plot. Lucky I had switched the glasses rather than confronting them immediately. A series of coincidences, or perhaps the universe balancing its scales after years of injustice. Jackson was not permitted in the hospital room, a condition of his release on bail. The police had found the remaining sedatives in his home office, along with printouts about medical power of attorney and involuntary conservatorship, all evidence supporting my account. Meredith regained consciousness around midnight, groggy and disoriented. Her eyes widened in confusion when she saw me at her bedside rather than her husband. "Arturo," she mumbled. "What happened? Where am I?" "You are in the hospital," I said gently. "You had a bad reaction to something in your one." Memory seemed to return in fragments, her face cycling through confusion, realization, and finally horror. "Jackson," she whispered. "He was going to you, and I drank." "Yes," I confirmed, seeing no point in sugarcoating the truth. She turned her face away, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. "I knew it was wrong," she said after a long moment. "I told him it was wrong, but I did not stop him." "No," I agreed. "You did not. He said we were in financial trouble, that we needed the money to save everything we had built, that you would never miss it, with so much suddenly coming to you that you never earned." The last part stung, though it merely confirmed what I had already suspected about my son's view of my worth. "Never earned," I repeated softly. 40 years of physical labor, joints that ache when it rains, missed vacations and second-hand clothes so he could have the best education, a wife who worked despite her pain until she physically could not anymore, but the inheritance that was unearned. Meredith had the grace to look ashamed. "He is not who I thought he was," she whispered. "Or maybe I just did not want to see." "We both made that mistake," I acknowledged. A detective arrived the next morning requesting a formal statement from Meredith. I stepped out to give them privacy, finding a quiet corner of the hospital cafeteria to collect my thoughts over a cup of mediocre coffee. When I returned to the room 2 hours later, Meredith's eyes were red from crying, but her expression was resolute. "I told them everything," she said. "About the financial troubles, The embezzlement from his firm that he thought he could cover up with your money. The life insurance policy he took out on you 3 months ago. Each revelation was another nail in the coffin of my relationship with my son. Yet I felt strangely numb, as if I had already mourned this loss long ago. "Thank you for telling the truth," I said simply. "It is the least I can do." She hesitated. "Arturo, I am filing for divorce as soon as I am discharged. I cannot stay with someone who would do this, who would use me as an unwitting accomplice to harm his own father." I nodded, understanding completely. "What will you do?" "Start over," she said with a sigh. "Somewhere new, away from all of this." "The baby complicates that," I observed. Her hand flew to her still flat stomach, eyes widening. "How did you know we had not told anyone yet?" "The doctors mentioned it when discussing your treatment options," I explained. "Said they had to be careful because of the pregnancy." She closed her eyes briefly. 6 weeks. I had only just confirmed it myself. "Congratulations." I offered the word inadequate for the complex situation. "My child will have a grandfather," she said, suddenly looking directly at me. "If you are willing. Jackson may have severed his connection to you, but this baby is innocent. Your grandchild deserves to know the man who values family enough to work his whole life for it." The offer was unexpected, a small light in the darkness of betrayal. "I would like that," I said quietly. When Meredith was discharged the following day, I drove her to a hotel rather than back to the house she had shared with Jackson. Neither of us could face returning to the scene of such a profound violation of trust. In the hotel parking lot, she paused before getting out of my car. "I really am sorry," she said, "for everything. For looking down on you because you worked with your hands. For the comments about your home. For not seeing the strength it takes to build a life from nothing." "We all have our blind spots," I replied. "The important thing is recognizing them before it is too late." The legal proceedings moved with surprising speed after that. Jackson's firm had already been investigating financial irregularities, and his arrest opened the floodgates to additional evidence. Beyond the attempted drugging, he now faced charges of embezzlement, insurance fraud, and financial exploitation of an elder, the last charge, particularly ironic given his earlier concerns about me being taken advantage of. I attended the preliminary hearing, sitting silently in the back row of the courtroom, as my son entered in handcuffs, the tailored suit replaced by county jail attire. He looked smaller, somehow diminished, without the trappings of success he had hidden behind for so long. His eyes found mine across the crowded room, and for a brief moment, I glimpsed something that might have been remorse or perhaps just regret at being caught. Then his lawyer whispered something, and he turned away, shoulders squared in defiance. The prosecutor approached me afterward, a kindly woman with tired eyes, who had clearly seen too many families destroyed by greed. "We have a strong case," she assured me. "With Meredith's testimony and the physical evidence, he is looking at significant time." "He is still my son," I said, surprising myself with the admission. She nodded, understanding. "Family cases are always the hardest. For what it is worth, Mr. Henderson, I have been doing this job for 20 years, and I have rarely seen a father who sacrificed as much as you did. Whatever happened here, it was not because you failed as a parent." Her words were meant to comfort, but they opened a floodgate. In the privacy of my car afterward, I finally allowed myself to weep great heaving sobs that came from the depths of my soul. For Donna, who had not lived to see what became of our boy. For the decades of sacrifice that had somehow produced a man capable of such calculated cruelty. For the grandchild, who would now be born under the shadow of its father's crimes. And finally, for myself, for the death of a dream I had carried since first holding my newborn son, the dream that all the work and worry would result in not just material success for him, but in the perpetuation of the values that had sustained our family through hard times. Jackson eventually accepted a plea deal, avoiding a trial, but receiving a 10-year sentence for the combined charges. I visited him once in prison, a month after his sentencing, unsure what I hoped to accomplish, but knowing I needed some form of closure. The visiting room was sparse, institutional, a far cry from the luxury he had surrounded himself with. He entered in his prison uniform, thinner, his once perfectly groomed hair, now cropped short, dark circles under his eyes. We sat across from each other at a small table, the gulf between us far greater than the physical distance. Why? I asked simply the question that had haunted me since that night. He stared at his hands, unable or unwilling to meet my gaze. It started small, he finally said, taking a little from client accounts to cover some bad investments. Then more when those didn't pan out. Then the firm started an audit, and I was going to lose everything. The house, the cars, my reputation. I panicked and decided your father's life was an acceptable price. He flinched. I wasn't thinking of it that way. I just saw a solution to my problems. I was never your problem, Jackson. I was the one person who would have helped you if you had just asked, who would have loved you regardless of your mistakes. Would you have given me $3 million to cover embezzled funds? He asked, a hint of the old defiance returning. No, I admitted. But I would have stood by you through the consequences, helped you rebuild after. That is what family does. I wouldn't know, he said bitterly. I never had that example. The accusation hung in the air between us, so patently false that for a moment I could only stare at him in disbelief. Never had that example, I repeated slowly. Your mother worked through pain so severe she cried in the shower where you couldn't hear her so you could have new baseball equipment instead of used. I missed your graduation from elementary school because I was working double shifts to pay for your summer science camp. We remortgaged our home, our only asset, to send you to college. And you never had an example of family sacrifice. He had no answer for that. The problem wasn't that you lacked examples, Jackson. It was that you never saw them as valuable. You were ashamed of us, of where you came from. Our sacrifices were an embarrassment to you, not a source of pride. That's not true, he protested weakly. Isn't it? You called me uneducated to your cousin, brought financial advisors to manage money you assumed I was too simple to handle, suggested I belonged in a retirement home at 63. You saw me as a liability, an obligation, until I suddenly had something you wanted. Then I became an obstacle to be removed. He looked away, unable to refute what we both knew was true. I don't hate you, Jackson, I said, surprising myself with the realization as I spoke it. I pity you, because for all your degrees and accomplishments, you missed the most important lesson, that real wealth isn't in bank accounts or stock portfolios. It's in how you love. And by that measure, despite all your financial success, you've lived a very poor life indeed. I stood to leave, having said what I needed to say. Dad, he called as I turned away. I am sorry for everything. I paused, not looking back. I believe you are sorry you got caught. I'm not sure you're sorry for anything else. Will you come back? He asked, a note of desperation in his voice. I don't know, I answered honestly. Some bridges once burned can never be rebuilt. But I'll be there for your child regardless. That's a promise. I walked out of that prison with a strange sense of lightness, as if setting down a heavy burden I had carried too long. The relationship I had treasured was gone, perhaps had never truly existed as I imagined it. But in accepting that truth, I found the freedom to move forward, to build something new from the ashes of what was lost. The year following Jackson's imprisonment brought changes I could never have anticipated. The most significant arrived on a snowy December morning when Meredith called from the hospital, her voice breathless between contractions. "It's happening," she said. "Earlier than expected. Can you come?" I arrived just in time to witness the birth of my granddaughter, a tiny, perfect being with a shock of dark hair and lungs that announced her arrival to the entire maternity ward. Meredith, exhausted but radiant, placed the swaddled infant in my arms. "Meet Donna Eleanor Henderson," she said softly, "named for her grandmother's." The weight of this small life in my arms bearing my late wife's name brought tears I made no attempt to hide. This child would never replace what I had lost, but she represented a new beginning, a chance to pass on the values I held dear to another generation. Meredith had settled in a small apartment, not far from my home, using her interior design skills to establish a modest business that allowed her to work flexible hours as a single mother. We established a routine where I would watch little Donna 2 days a week, giving Meredith time to meet with clients, while I experienced the joys of grandparenthood I had once feared were lost to me forever. These days with my granddaughter became the highlight of my week. I would take her to the park, read her stories, or simply sit with her sleeping form cradled against my chest, marveling at how completely this tiny person had captured my heart. Through her, I rediscovered simple pleasures, the wonder of a butterfly landing on a flower, the joy of splashing in puddles, the comfort of a hand trustingly placed in mine. The inheritance that had indirectly caused so much pain also enabled new beginnings. Beyond the scholarship established in Donna's name, I renovated our modest home not to make it fancy, but to ensure it would remain sturdy and comfortable for years to come. I traveled to places Donna and I had dreamed of visiting together, taking small mementos of her, a scarf, a favorite book, photographing them against backdrops of the Grand Canyon, the Eiffel Tower, the crystalline waters of the Caribbean. "Taking her with you," my grief counselor observed when I shared these photos. "A beautiful tribute." The grief counseling had been Meredith's suggestion, part of her own healing journey after the trauma of Jackson's betrayal. Initially reluctant, I found unexpected solace in the weekly sessions, gradually unpacking decades of emotions I had suppressed in my drive to provide for others. "You've spent your life being strong for everyone else," the counselor noted during one session. "When was the last time you allowed yourself to be vulnerable?" I had no ready answer, having equated vulnerability with weakness for so long that the distinction had blurred beyond recognition. But slowly through these conversations and the supportive friendships I began to cultivate, I learned that true strength included acknowledging pain, accepting help, and allowing myself to need others as much as they needed me. One such friendship developed with Frank, my longtime neighbor, who had recently retired from his accounting practice. What began as occasional invitations to watch football games evolved into weekly fishing trips, our conversations ranging from the mundane to the profound, as we sat side by side on the lakeshore lines, cast into still waters. "Never understood the appeal of fishing until now," Frank commented one evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon. "It's not really about catching fish at all, is it?" "Took me 64 years to figure that out myself," I replied with a chuckle. "Lots of things in life aren't really about what they seem to be on the surface." Through Frank, I was introduced to a group of retirees who volunteered teaching construction skills to at-risk youth. Twice a month, I found myself in a community center workshop, guiding inexperienced hands as they learned to measure, cut, and build. These young people, many from broken homes or difficult circumstances, reminded me in some ways of myself at their age, hungry for knowledge, desperate for approval, needing someone to believe in their potential. Mr. H, check this out. Dayon, a gangly 16-year-old, called one afternoon, proudly displaying a perfectly executed dovetail joint. First try. Exceptional work. I told him, the pride in his eyes mirroring what I had once hoped to see in Jackson's. You have a natural talent for this. You think I could do this for real, like as a job someday. I think you can do anything you set your mind to, I assured him. And construction paid for my son's college education. Never underestimate the value of skilled work. What I didn't say, but perhaps he understood anyway, was that those skills had sustained me through the darkest periods of my life. When everything else failed, when dreams crumbled and relationships fractured, the ability to build something solid with my own two hands had remained a constant source of pride and purpose. As the months passed, I maintained sporadic communication with Jackson through letters and the occasional phone call. Our conversations remained stilted, superficial, neither of us quite ready or able to bridge the chasm his actions had created. He expressed interest in his daughter, asking for photos and updates, which I provided with Meredith's permission. Do you think you'll ever forgive him completely? Meredith asked one evening, as we sat on my back porch watching little Donna toddle across the grass chasing fireflies. I considered the question carefully. Forgiveness isn't an event, I finally replied. It's a process. Some days I think I've managed it. Other days the anger and hurt feel as fresh as they did that night. But I'm working on it, not for his sake, but for my own. And for hers, Meredith added, nodding toward our granddaughter. Yes, I agreed. She deserves to inherit love, not bitterness. The wisdom of that statement struck me as soon as I uttered it. How much of Jackson's behavior had been influenced by resentments and materialism he had absorbed from the world around him? What values would this new generation embrace or reject based on what we modeled? Now I began writing letters to little Donna to be given to her when she was older. Letters detailing family stories, lessons learned, values I hoped she would carry forward. Letters explaining her father's absence in terms she might someday understand without being destroyed by the knowledge. Letters filled with the love I had always felt, but perhaps failed to adequately express to my own child. One evening, visiting Donna's grave as I did every month, I found myself speaking aloud to her as if she could hear. I wish you could see her, our granddaughter, I said, placing fresh flowers against the headstone. She has your laugh, did I tell you that, and your kindness. Meredith says she shares her snacks at playgroup without being asked. A gentle breeze rustled the cemetery trees, the only response to my monologue. I'm doing better, Donna. Found some new friends. Started volunteering. Even dating a little, though nobody special yet. Would that be okay with you, do you think? If I found someone eventually? The question hung in the air, unanswered, yet somehow resolved. Donna had never been the jealous type in life. She would not begrudge me companionship in her absence. I miss you every day, I continued. But I'm learning to carry that missing as part of me, not something that stops me from living. I think you'd be proud of that. As I walked back to my car, I noticed an elderly woman placing flowers at a nearby grave. Our eyes met briefly, a moment of silent understanding passing between us, two people acquainted with loss, yet still finding reasons to bring beauty to the world. Later that week, as I played with little Donna in the local park, a young construction worker approached our bench, his hard hat tucked under one arm. "Excuse me, sir," he said hesitantly. "Are you Arturo Henderson by any chance?" Surprised, I nodded. "That's me." "I thought so." His face lit up. "My dad worked with you back in the day. Mike Daniels. He always said you were the best foreman he ever had. Taught him everything he knows." The name sparked immediate recognition. "Mike, good man, excellent with electrical work. How is he doing?" Retired now, but still keeping busy. He's the reason I went into the trade. The young man extended his hand. I'm Tommy, by the way. We chatted for a few minutes about the construction business changes in safety regulations, mutual acquaintances from the old crew. As he prepared to leave, Tommy gestured toward little Donna, now industriously filling a bucket with sand. Your granddaughter? Yes, I said proudly. Donna. She's lucky to have you, he said simply. Not everyone gets to learn from someone with your experience. My dad's lessons have carried me through some tough times. After he walked away, I sat pondering his words, the unexpected affirmation from a stranger connecting past to present in ways I had not anticipated. Perhaps this was the true legacy, not the material possessions or financial security I had so desperately tried to provide for Jackson, but the values, skills, and examples we set that ripple outward in ways we may never fully witness or understand. That night, I added a new page to my collection of letters for little Donna. The true measure of wealth isn't what you accumulate, but what you give away. Not just money, though, that has its place, but knowledge, time, compassion, forgiveness. These are the treasures that appreciate rather than depreciate, that can never be stolen or squandered, that remain when all else is lost. I didn't always understand this. I thought providing meant protecting you from hardship, ensuring you never faced the financial struggles I knew growing up. But some lessons can only be learned through challenge, some strength built only through adversity. The most valuable inheritance I can leave you isn't in any bank account or property deed. It's the knowledge that you are loved unconditionally, that your worth isn't measured by your achievements or possessions, that kindness and integrity matter more than status or wealth. Life will bring its share of betrayals and disappointments. People you trust may hurt you deeply. Dreams you cherish may crumble before your eyes. But these wounds, painful as they are, need not define you. With time and courage, they can transform into wisdom, compassion, and a deeper appreciation for the genuine connections that sustain us. This is what I've learned through my journey, that true dignity isn't in revenge, but in rising above bitterness. That healing comes not from denying pain, but from integrating it into a larger story of resilience and growth. That even in our darkest moments, we retain the power to choose how we respond, who we become in the aftermath of loss. These are my gifts to you, little one. May they serve you well in the life that awaits. As I signed the letter, I felt a sense of completion, of having distilled decades of experience into essential truths worth passing on. The journey had been far from what I expected when I first held my son in my arms all those years ago. There had been more pain than I could have imagined, more betrayal than seemed bearable at times. But there had also been unexpected joy, newfound purpose, and the profound discovery that what I had always sought, love, belonging, meaning, had been available all along. Not in the possession of things or the approval of others, but in the daily choice to live with integrity, to remain open to connection, despite past wounds, to find value in being rather than having. This was the wealth that could never be poisoned, stolen, or diminished. This was the inheritance I claimed for myself and offered freely to those who would receive it. So have you ever experienced betrayal from someone you sacrificed everything for? How did you find the strength to move forward? Share your stories in the comments below, and if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that healing is possible even after the deepest wounds. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, true wealth is measured not by what you have, but by how you love.